As we've been mentioning the whole morning, today is budget day, it's the 30th of March, and the National Treasury Cabinet Secretary Henry Rotich is set to read the budget statement before Parliament this afternoon, with a lot of focus on how the state looks to raise funds to finance the country's largest budget ever. We are now joined live by Dan Mwangi, who is at the Treasury building, to give us a brief of what is expected. And Dan, we know as much as Rotich is getting ready, a lot of this information is already out there. What do you have?
Well, yes, true, Ken. A lot of information is out because the budget process changed from what it was many years ago with the new constitution, where we have a lot of public participation, and so a lot of the details are already out. So what is really being looked at is how the government is looking, the different measures the government is going to take to ensure that they can finance this budget. 2.62 trillion shillings is the largest we've ever had, and this is going to be funded through the taxes that you and I pay as Kenyans, as well as other sources of income and revenue for the country, such as loans and donors and the likes. Now, when it comes to the revenues, what the Kenya Revenue Authority is meant to collect has gone up. Last year, the current year we are in, actually, the target is 1.4 trillion shillings. But for the next year, budget year, is 1.7 trillion shillings. That's an additional 300 billion shillings. So the question is, how is this going to be funded? And now the National Treasury made it clear last week that it does not intend on increasing the taxes that we're meant to pay, because more often than not, the government would easily move towards the direction of increasing taxes. But the National Treasury has said that is not going to happen this year. And so we wait to see how that is going to happen, especially considering that the Kenya Revenue Authority, which now has all the pressure to ensure it raises more, has already been falling short of its targets in the course of the year. In the quarterly reports, it has not met its targets. So you can think about a revenue authority that is not meeting its targets so far, but now the target for the next financial year is being raised even further. Now, one of the things that is likely to come up is how the government is looking to include those who have not been in the tax bracket, the informal businesses, because the informal sector has a lot of people and businesses that do not remit any taxes or do not remit the taxes that are due the government. And so this has been one of the greatest challenges the Kenya Revenue Authority has been facing over time, to see how to bring in those who are avoiding tax or evading tax in one way or another to get into the tax bracket. Then that would enable the country to finance its own budget to a large extent. That is the challenge now, because the National Treasury, the KRA, has been trying over years to bring in more people, and this is yet to bear as much fruit as it would have desired. And so this is one thing that's going to be looked at. Something else that's now keen, a conversation that's been going on, has been the back and forth about the national debt, which is partly being financed through again our taxes. So the national debt is significant, but the government says we're in a safe zone. But many people are saying that is not the case. So we wait to see how the government is going to do this. Considering this is an election year, we go back to the conversation on taxes. The government is likely not to increase taxes again. And analysts have been saying this is partly because of the fact that an election year, you don't want to overburden, or rather further burden, the Mwananchi, who is the same voter. So the government has to play it safe. But this safety also needs to be within the precincts of practicality economically, and just seeing the large numbers of people who are unemployed, especially the youth, who are the majority of the population. Question is, how is this going to be done? And you see, this coming financial year is also going to host the opening. It's going to have the opening of the standard gauge railway, which the government has been saying is promising to provide a lot of jobs. And so we're to see that benefiting. And see, the government insists that the country's economy is growing very well, even talk about debt, and it's in good margin. However, we look at the number of companies that have been either laying off hundreds, and not as going to the thousands of employees have been laid off because the companies cannot manage to finance and to hold these costs. Even as you think about even the government's wage bill, which the president said is 50% of what we collect as Kenyans in terms of taxes goes to only 2% of Kenyans, which is a very significant figure and a very worrisome one, which now the Salaries and Remuneration Commission is looking into. So these are some of the things we're waiting to see to be looked into by the Cabinet Secretary's statement of the budget for this year. And we know that not in a few hours or an hour or so thereabouts, we hope that he shall be walking out, accompanied by his Principal Secretary, that's Kamau Thuge, as well as the Cabinet Secretary in the Ministry of Planning and of Devolution and Planning, that's Mwangi Kionjori, alongside other officials from the National Treasury and the relevant arms of government, as well as the chairman of the Parliamentary Budget Committee, to come and, first of all, for the photo opportunity where they hold up the briefcase, and as always, they'll be donning the flowers. Those flowers, we keep talking about them. These flowers were raised for an opportunity such as this, just to be on a cabinet secretary's court for a big day, the budget day. So the conversation continues, and we are looking to see how the government is going to tackle issues of unemployment, issues of national debt, and also managing the communication that it gives out to the public to ensure there is public goodwill and public confidence in what the government is doing, which over the years has been dwindling, and this has become a concern. And even analysts and even donors and partners are also keen on looking at how this is communicated and the public goodwill and actually the effect of the resources that are being given and are being raised to go towards the different projects. And the government keeps saying it is not borrowing for recurrent expenditure. Recurrent expenditure here is largely the almost everyday costs that the government incurs, including salaries, which, like I said, are very high and need to be cut down. And there have been proposals of having even a referendum to see how to cut down on the number of elective posts. The Senate, the MCAs, the MPs, how to bring those elective posts brought down in terms of number, which would ultimately bring down the wage bill the government is having to face. And so the National Treasury today is going to be having a lot of focus on it, just to see how it will look into the different areas. We've been having a lot of issues in the health sector. We saw the doctors were, on a 100-day strike, and they are now back to work, waiting for it's less than 100 days now. It's a number of days before they can now have the government sign the CBA, the collective bargaining agreement. And now this conversation now again translates into money, because the money not only goes into paying the salaries, also goes into facilitating the different facilities in the country, the health facilities. So we'll wait to see what is going to be done, if anything, to ensure that the health facilities can be well equipped further. And the counties, devolution is a big thing, and that's why we see the devolution CS being in this whole conversation. And so the devolution CS is going to be here, and we are going to be seeing how the counties are going to get their monies, if the government will choose to add a bit more, because the counties consistently have been asking for a larger allocation in terms of what is given to them, to ensure that they have a lower burden in terms of what they charge in the taxes and levies within their counties. Because, for instance, if you have a county whose total budget, hypothetically, is $1 billion shillings, and the national government gives them 200 million shillings, that means they have 800 million to raise. And from that amount of money, it means if it is not raising that much, it has to raise a lot of the other levies and taxes. And that's why we saw, especially at the beginning of this devolved system of government, we saw a lot of businessmen in various counties taking to the streets complaining about the higher taxes, the higher levies on different things. And so we'll see whether the government is going to again give more funds. And the central government has been very categorical that has kept on giving above and beyond the constitutional requirement of allocation to the county. So we'll wait to see how this is going to go. As well as education, we know one of the Jubilee promises when it comes to laptops, which now turned into tablets for Standard 1 pupils, has actually begun to be rolled out and is actually in place. We already have the pupils using some of this in various parts of the country. And so now we're to see what else we get into the education sector, which has in the past been a big winner when it comes to the budget. So we wait to see which are going to be the winners and the losers in this. And just to, before I hand it back to Ken, just to remind you that this is an election year. Election year comes a lot of dynamics. We have to finance the elections. There has to be money set aside in the event that there's a runoff. In the event that there's a runoff, that is if any of the presidential candidates does not get 50+1. So this has to be factored into the budget, as well as thinking about the security aspect. Security is a big factor in the country, a big factor when it comes to elections, and just generally, especially coming from a number of years when Kenya has been the target of some terror attacks, which fortunately have gone down in terms of the number of attacks they have been. But now and we've been seeing the government adding more and more security facilities and equipment to ensure that they can have more and more security being beefed up in the country. So it's wait to see how the security is going to benefit from this budget in the 2017-2018 statement. And just remind you that this is being done earlier than it should have been. Ideally, we have this in June, but however, the National Treasury requested and was approved by Parliament that they can have it pulled back about 3 months, because by the time it's June, most of the parliamentarians, most of the senators and members of parliament will be likely to be out on campaigns, and so the quorum required to pass this, because this is actually a finance bill. This is actually a bill that he's actually proposing to parliament, which will then go through the various levels of legislation, and then will be passed, and any amendments should be made, and then the president will sign it into law. And so that means whatever is announced today may not necessarily all in its entirety is not going to be cast in stone as law. This is going to be something that's subject to the passing by Parliament. Then we can have the President assenting to it if there'll be no issues around that. So, Ken, you're still here. I'm on the pavement of Lieutenant Tumbo Avenue, where it meets with Harambee Avenue, right outside the National Treasury building, waiting for the CS and his team to come out for the photo op, which shall be taking live as well and bringing to you, and we shall move with them all the way to Parliament, when we shall then listen into what the government has in store for us. So, Ken, as you plan your budget, let's see whether the government is planning it for you on the larger scale. Back to you.
Dan, make sure you find some time and come and explain to me why you smiled when you mentioned the flowers. And secondly, it's amazing, 50% of the total revenue collection only goes to 2%. And I've also realized that as much as a lot of things have changed, Dan, the tradition of holding the briefcase and working with it has not changed. Thank you very much. We are looking forward to your report later on. Thank you.